Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 73 of the Playoff Push podcast. I'm your host, Jack Dobbins, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. We got Brian McRae in the house, former center fielder for Kansas City, for Chicago, for the Mets. So many teams and so many great seasons. How are we doing today?
I'm good, Jack. And yourself? I'm getting ready for hopefully some nicer weather here in Kansas City and spring training on the horizon.
Exactly. The weather's not much better here in State College, Pennsylvania. We got about 10 degrees at max over the last 2 weeks, so it has not been too nice to us out here.
Yeah, the snow is finally starting to melt here, so that's a good sign.
Very good sign, even though Puxatawny Phil just decided to give us 6 more weeks of winter, and there's nothing we can do about that. So heading into spring training, baseball season's about to get underway, and I have the viewers don't know this yet, and I'm not going to state the name, but I just told you I'm getting a current Kansas City Royal on the show next week. I want to ask you originally with the Royals aspect to your family. Obviously, your father is a Royals legend, and you came in as a Kansas City Royal to begin your career in 1990. What do the Kansas City Royals mean to your family?
My dad got traded here in 1973 from the Cincinnati Reds, and most people don't even know he played for the Reds for 6 or 7 years before he came to Kansas City. So he built his legacy and his career, and basically most of the things that he did in his time in Kansas City and on some of those good teams from the late 70s to the mid 80s are what people remember him for. And I grew up a little bit in Cincinnati, but I was too young to remember a lot of that. And most of my memories of baseball are here in Kansas City or down in Fort Myers for spring training with the Royals. So we're very grateful to what the city of Kansas City meant to our family and embraced my dad when he got here. And he played well enough to stick here for a long time, 14, 15 years or so, and built a great legacy with what those teams were able to accomplish.
When you played in Kansas City, what was the environment like? Did they see you as, the future of the franchise when you first came up? How did they like embrace you?
A bit of transition time when I came up. I got drafted in '85, the year they won the World Series, and I got to the big leagues in '90. And at that point, the team had some leftover from the '85 team, but they were sort of in a real rebuild or not there. So I don't think when I got called up, the expectations for me to do more at that time than just try to fit in and see if I could play every day and see what my role was going to be. Bo Jackson got hurt, and that was the reason that I got called up. And originally, I wasn't supposed to be up for that long with Bo out, and then I played well enough in that short period of time when Bo was out that I took over the center field job and was there for the next 4.5 years or so. But I think it was just a big transition. Ewan Kaufman, the owner, he was ill, and he ended up passing in '93, I think it was. So the team was in flux. It was a lot going on, and I was told I'd be up for 2 weeks, and ended up, as I said, doing well enough to sticking around and playing well. And then 91 and '92, the team was not that good, and then '93 was when we started to play well, and I started to kind of hit my stride as far as developing into an everyday player. And '93 and '94, were pretty good teams. Had a chance to make it to the postseason in '94. That got derailed with the strike in August of '94. I really believe that team was good enough to make it to the playoffs. We were 2 games or 3 games out at the time, and so I think, to summarize, basically my tenure with the Royals, at the beginning it was in flux. The organization was trying to determine if they were contenders or rebuilding, and then at the end we had rebuilt and turned into a playoff caliber team in '93 and '94, and everything got cut short with the strike. And then I got traded, and the organization went into disarray for a while.
What is it like going through something like that? Going from, a great team back to a rebuild and then back to a great team again. A lot of players, either head out of the way in the start of the rebuild or at the end of it, but you stayed through. What was that like?
Well, when you're just getting called up, you're not worried about a whole lot other than just trying to play well enough to stick. So 90 to 92, I was just trying to survive and was not worried as much about the winning and the losing as I was as I got later in my career. You're just trying to stick and play well enough that you can be on the roster and get a chance to play almost every day. And those were your main focuses. Your early part of your career is just where do I fit in? What can I do to stay? What do I have to do? And you just try to take care of yourself and do your job.
You mentioned Bo Jackson earlier, obviously one of the greatest athletes in the history of the world. What was it like playing alongside him, even the same position?
I just like to watch how guys work. And I got to play a little bit in minor league spring training with him and instructional league. So I'd known him for a few years before I got to the big leagues. And the thing I just took from most of the guys there was just their work ethic and what they did to stay ready, to stay healthy, to prepare themselves day in and day out. And those are the things that I took from watching George Brett and watching Bo and Frank White, some of those players when I first came up was how they prepared themselves every day and how they prepared themselves to get ready to go through a long season, the ups and downs and all that comes with playing 180 some odd games, starting with spring training and go into the regular season.
Exactly. And then you mentioned that you went over to Chicago after that 94 season. And in my opinion, you had your best season in 1995. What was that season that stood out to you with the 109 OPS plus and the stellar defense?
Well, that was after the strike, so it was a shortened season, and it was a lot of uncertainty because we didn't know when the strike was gonna end and if they were gonna play with the replacement players. It was all that going on, so it was a lot of newness. Getting traded from the Royals to the Cubs, going from the American League to the National League, because at that time the leagues didn't play each other. They were totally different games. The National League seemed to fit with my game at that point in my career. I started to establish myself in 93 and 94. And going into 95, I felt that, I was starting to hit my stride a little bit as far as what kind of player I was going to be. And I enjoyed Chicago. I liked the day games. That schedule fit with, I'm a morning person. I like getting up and going to the ballpark. So all those things fit well. And I really enjoyed my tenure there in Chicago and playing for the Cubs and, enjoying all that comes with playing in a big city like that.
There's a lot of difference between Kansas City and Chicago as fan bases. What would you say is the biggest difference to you playing in both?
Well, the biggest difference is the amount of time a club has been in one city to build up a fan base generation to generation. The Royals came into existence in 1969, and the Cubs have been around since the formation of the National League. So you have some things that are ingrained there in Chicago that with that fan base and with that city that you don't have in other places. But that's because of over time. The uniqueness of Wrigley Field with the day games. At the time that I was traded there, we were only allowed to play 19 night games. So out of your 81 games, you're playing the majority of day games. So there's a different feel to the crowd. People will come in the games at 1 o'clock, noon during the week. They're skipping work. It's more like a vacation. So it's the mood and the energy is a little bit different in the daytime than it is for night baseball, and all those things make Wrigley and playing in Chicago unique.
I toured Wrigley about 2 years ago, and it was such an incredible experience. Just being able to stand there and soak in all the history, look at the dimensions. It's very different compared to the other ballparks.
Yeah, it's a different ballpark. It's short in the alleys. and a little bit deep down the lines. You have your ivy. You don't have padding on the wall in the outfield, so that ivy, as the season goes on, it starts to get thick, but it still doesn't pad the concrete that's behind it. So you learn what not to do and what to do there and how to play that field. And if a ball gets stuck in the ivy, you just raise your hands up and you don't try to reach in there for it. You know, there's little
Take the ground rule.
little oddities of playing there that you learn over time, and that some visiting players have trouble with. The wind currents coming off the Lake Michigan. You know that it could be pretty windy at times, so you had to learn as an outfielder how to play that wind and which flags basically determine where the wind was blowing. So those were things that took me a while to adjust to, but I enjoyed that aspect of playing in Wrigley, because I felt that, you know, I could cover a lot of ground there, and it wasn't as much ground to cover as Kauffman Stadium here in Kansas City.
And when you were in Chicago, you played with Sammy Sosa just prior to the home run chase, not quite at that point yet. But what was it like playing with Sammy Sosa, who would ultimately end up being one of the most legendary power hitters of all time?
Yeah, you could see where things were going with him from the 3 years there from '95 to '97 when I was there playing with him. That he was not only developing into a good power hitter, but he was developing into a good hitter. You know, he wasn't a guy that was hitting 220 with a bunch of home runs. He was starting to hit for higher average, taking some walks, doing some different things, and you could tell that he was going to start doing some real damage soon. And it was a joy to be in the lineup with him because he made everybody else in the lineup a lot better. And I played with him in the minor leagues when he was with the Texas Rangers, and he weighed like 160 pounds at 16, 17 years old. Well, him and Juan Gonzalez were on the same rookie ball teams. So I saw those guys grow through the minor leagues, and the progression and all the things that they were able to do. You know, it was fun to see a lot of the guys that I played with in the minor leagues have success. And when they get to the big leagues, 8, 10, 12 years later, we were 17-year-old kids when we signed, and then we get to the big leagues and start establishing ourselves. And it was neat to be able to see the progression of guys from when we first got drafted and trying to figure things out to almost a finished product when we get to the big leagues.
What was that team dynamic like with those guys?
The '95 team was a lot of guys came from different organizations because the Cubs were not very good in '94. And then after the strike, there were a lot of things that were thrown in together. So that '95 team was, I think we played well enough to be in the race for the wild card at the end of the season. But it was just an odd mix of guys that was kind of thrown together because spring training was quick and all that. So it took us a while into the season to gel. But once we did, towards the end of the season, I think we would have had another week or 10 days of the season. We would have been able to make a push to get into the playoffs. But it was a lot of weird things that happened after the strike in '94, and then with the shortened spring training in '95, and then the shortened season of '95. It was almost like a blur to put all that together.
We've been talking a lot about 95. We're going to continue to talk about 95 with this next one. You had some power of your own. We can get off of Sammy Sosa for a second. Let's talk about your walk-off homer, September 24th, 1995, against the Pirates in a 3-2 win. That briefly pushed you guys back into that crazy playoff contention. Do you remember that moment?
I remember because that time in the season, I had a wrist injury on my left wrist. I found out after the season that I tore some ligaments in my wrist. So I really wasn't able to take batting practice a whole lot or swing extra a lot. And I was just trying to grind it out for the rest of the season, since we were in a playoff race. And every swing I took hurt. So when I took a swing, I had to make sure that swing was going to make contact. And At that point when I hit it, we won the game. I was happy because we won the game, but my wrist was killing me running around the bases, and I didn't know if I had another week left in me to be able to grind it out with how bad my wrist was, and then I ended up having surgery after the season was over. But those moments at the end of the season were fun because we were in a pennant race. The games mattered. It meant something. I was going to try to play as much as I could, as much as my hand was able to take. That was a fun moment. I think that's the only walk-off home run that I had in my career.
Hey, any walk-off homer is better than no walk-off homers, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Even with the wrist injury, I feel like you were hitting almost 300 at that point, somewhere around
Yeah,
that
I hit
290.
290, I think, or 288 in the season, and I know there was a few times during that last month of the season when Jim Riggleman had asked me if I wanted some days off to rest my wrist, and he was more concerned with me trying to hit 300. I didn't care. I wanted to help my team win ball games, and that was the main focus for me. But he'd asked me a few times if hitting 300 meant a big deal to me, and I was like, no. It's like, nah. He goes, because he's like, you had a great year, and if you don't hit 300 because you struggle late or whatever, would that diminish? It's like, no. The only thing that would diminish anything is, I want us to make the playoffs. If I hit 290, 280, 275, whatever, it's still, to me, it was a good year, and we were in a playoff contention, and it didn't bother me that I didn't hit 300.
For the final question about the career, we're going to go all the way back to the absolute beginning of it. Being a first round draft pick out of high school, what was the pressure like just immediately having to jump in and feel the need to prove yourself?
Well, as a first round pick, and then being picked with the organization that your dad is currently playing for, you get a lot of scrutiny for being a first round pick to begin with, and then um, with the father son aspect of it, I just felt that early I put a lot more pressure on myself to do more because I was a first round pick. And I was 17 years old at the time when I was drafted. I was young. I was playing against older kids. I was going to struggle. I knew that. But I think I tried to enhance my development a little bit more than the regular process just because I felt like more eyes were on me, and I needed to do more instead of just take the regular path that high school kids take. It's 4 to 5 years, and then you should be close to the big leagues, and that's kind of how it worked out. But early, I think I put a little bit more pressure on myself the first 2 years or so in the minor leagues, and then just enjoy how it was going, and the progress, and enjoy the ride. I wish I would have been able to do that a little bit more, but when you're a first round pick and you're 17-year-old, you have a lot of things running through your mind, and sometimes you're not thinking as clearly as you need to about how your development needs to go, and how you need to just take it all in. And the struggles, I'd much rather struggle in the minor leagues than I did in the big leagues. And so once I got to the big leagues, I wasn't worried about all that other stuff. A lot of that things, that being a first round pick, playing for the team my dad played for, all those things were out of the way once I got to the big leagues, because I knew that I was in the big leagues because I'd earned it by the way that the process and how I worked, and all those things that I was worried about and people talking about and things like that. They were out of the picture once I got to the big leagues.
Exactly. 10 years in the bigs, 103 homers.
I was told I'd be up for 2 weeks, and I got right about 10 years in, 15 years in total of playing professional baseball, counting the years in the minor leagues. So, I'm very blessed to have the career that I had, and enjoyed playing in Kansas City, Chicago, and New York.
Sounds like a good deal to me. When people look back at your career, if you could only choose one thing for them to remember you by, what would it be?
Just that I was durable. I never went on the DL my whole career, minor leagues or major leagues. I was available to play every day, played hard, and for the most part, had a pretty successful career and did things to try to help my team win. And sometimes that might have diminished my personal stats, but I didn't worry about those things. I was just all about trying to win a ball game. Winning, everybody gets taken care of when you win, and winning as a team is a lot more fun than just having great stats.
Exactly. All righty. Thank you so much for coming on the show, episode 73. Any final words?
No, I just appreciate you having me on, Jack, and looking forward to not only spring training but the World Baseball Classic and warmer weather.
Exactly. That's all we can hope for. Baseball and better weather. That's all we need in life. Episode 73 of the Playoff Push Podcast officially in the books. I'm your host, Jack Dobbins. Thank you all for tuning in and have a great rest of your day.